The signal came at 0347 hours. Ship time. Tai-Ho Park stood on the bridge of the U.S. Indomitable, watching the stars through the main viewport. He was a tall man with gray at his temples and scars on his hands from wars most people wanted to forget. Behind him, his crew worked in quiet routine. They had been stationed at the edge of Galactic Union space for 6 months now, doing nothing important. Patrol duty. Diplomatic presence. A waste of good soldiers. The Galactic Union had never known what to do with humans. When Earth made first contact 15 years ago, the aliens had been fascinated and terrified in equal measure. Humans came from what they called a Class 12 death world, a planet where the gravity was crushing, where the weather could kill in minutes, where the animals were built for murder and the plants could be poison. The fact that humans had survived it all was considered a miracle. The fact that they had built cities and ships and traveled to the stars was considered impossible. The Union had invited humanity to join as a formality. They expected the strange Deathworlders to sit quietly and be grateful. They did not expect them to build a fleet. They did not expect them to expand. They certainly did not expect them to be useful. Yuna Kim was the first to notice the signal. She was young for a lieutenant commander, barely 30, but she had sharp eyes and a sharper mind. Her fingers moved across her console as the distress call came through the static. It was weak. It was desperate. It was unlike anything she had ever heard. "Admiral," she said, her voice cutting through the quiet bridge. "We have an incoming transmission. Priority 1. It is from the Velari homeworld." Tai-Ho turned. The Velari were a peaceful species. Insectoid beings with delicate wings and large eyes that seemed to hold all the sadness in the universe. They were scholars and artists. They had never built a weapon in their entire history. The Union considered them valuable for their knowledge and their culture, but useless in every practical way. "Put it through," Tai-Ho said. The bridge speakers crackled. Then a voice came through, high and thin and filled with fear. "This is High Scholar Velith of the Velari Collective. We are under attack. The Dominion has come. They are burning our cities. They are taking our people. Please, anyone who hears this, we beg you for help. Our children are dying. Please." The message repeated, over and over. The same words. The same terror. Yuna looked up at her admiral. "Sir, I am scanning Union channels. There is no response. No one is answering." Tai-Ho felt something cold settle in his chest. "Contact Union Command. Ask them what is happening." It took 20 minutes to get a response. When it came, it was from a Galactic Union bureaucrat whose name Tai-Ho did not bother to remember. The alien's face was flat and emotionless on the viewscreen. "The Council has voted," the bureaucrat said. "The Velari situation is regrettable, but intervention is not possible. The Dominion has made their intentions clear. Any species that interferes will face consequences. The Union has decided to maintain neutrality." Tai-Ho stared at the screen. Neutrality. They are being slaughtered. The Dominion is powerful. They have conquered 40 species. They have never been defeated. The Council believes that resistance would only lead to greater losses. The Velari will be absorbed into Dominion territory. It is unfortunate, but it is the safest course of action for the Union as a whole. Safe for who? Tai-Ho asked. His voice was quiet now. Dangerous dot, the bureaucrat blinked. For everyone. Admiral Park, I understand that humans are new to galactic politics. But this is how things work. The strong take what they want. The weak survive by not drawing attention. The Velari drew attention. They will pay the price. It is tragic, but it is reality. Tai-Ho ended the transmission without another word. The bridge was silent. Every officer stared at their admiral, waiting. They had all heard the distress call. They had all heard the Union's response. They all knew what their admiral was thinking, because they were thinking it too. G1 Ru was the first to speak. She was Taiho's second in command, a vice admiral with ice in her veins and fire in her heart. She had served with Taiho for 12 years. She knew him better than anyone. The Union will not act, she said. It was not a question. No, Taiho replied. They will not. And if we act alone, we will be going against council wishes. We could be expelled from the Union. We could start a war that humanity is not ready for. Taiho looked at his crew, at Yuna, whose hands were still shaking from the distress call, at the young officers who had never seen real combat, at the veterans who had seen too much. I joined the fleet because I believed in something, Taiho said slowly. I believed that the strong should protect the weak, that the brave should stand for those who cannot stand for themselves. I did not join to watch innocent people die while politicians calculate acceptable losses. He walked to the communications console. Open a channel. All frequencies. Every human ship in known space. Yuna hesitated for only a moment. Then she did as she was told. Taiho spoke into the microphone, and his words went out across the stars. This is Fleet Admiral Taiho Park of the U.E.'s Indomitable. By now, you have all heard the Velari distress signal. You have all heard the Union's decision to abandon them. I am not asking the Union for permission. I am not waiting for the Council to change their minds. I am going to Velari Prime. I am going to fight the Dominion. And I am asking every human who can hear my voice to join me. He paused. The weight of what he was doing pressed down on him like gravity. We came from a world that tried to kill us every day of our existence. We survived storms and predators and ice ages and plagues. We clawed our way to the stars through blood and pain and sacrifice. And now we sit here, watching while another species faces extinction, and we do nothing? No, that is not who we are. That has never been who we are. His voice hardened. Humanity declares war on the Dominion. All ships set course for the Velari system. We move in 48 hours. He cut the transmission. The bridge was silent again. But this time, it was a different kind of silence. It was the silence before a storm. G1 stepped forward. You know what this means. I know, Taiho said. Many of us will die. I know. G1 smiled. It was a cold smile, but it was real. Then let us make sure it is worth it. Across the galaxy, human ships began to move. Freighters, destroyers, cruisers, research vessels, colony defense fleets. Every human who could fly was answering the call. The Galactic Union watched in shock. The Dominion did not yet know what was coming, but they would learn. The rally point was a dead system. No planets, no stations, just a dying red star and empty space. It was the kind of place where nothing happened, until the ships started arriving. Sung Ho Beek brought his destroyer, the Black Tide, through hyperspace at full burn. He was a hard man with a face like carved stone, and eyes that had seen too much death. Before he commanded a starship, he had led ground forces on a dozen colony worlds. He had seen what slavers did to their victims. He had walked through the pits where they kept the broken ones. When he heard Admiral Park's transmission, he did not hesitate. He turned his ship toward the rally point and pushed the engines until they screamed. He was not alone. Ships came from everywhere. They came from Earth, from Mars, from the orbital stations around Jupiter and Saturn. They came from colony worlds with names that most people had never heard. Freighters stripped their cargo holds and mounted weapons. Research vessels welded armor plates to their hulls. Mining ships turned their industrial lasers into weapons of war. Seung Ho watched them arrive. One by one, then by the dozens, then by the hundreds. He had served in the fleet for 20 years. He had never seen anything like this. "Captain," his first officer said, "current count is 412 vessels. More are arriving every hour." Sung-ho nodded slowly. "How many are combat ready?" "About half. The rest are converted civilian ships, lightly armed. Minimal armor. They came anyway." "Yes, sir. They came anyway." Sung-ho thought about that. Freighter captains who had never fired a weapon in their lives. Scientists who had devoted themselves to knowledge. Miners and traders and colonists who had everything to lose and nothing to gain except the knowledge that they had done what was right. They were all going to die. Many of them, at least. They knew it. They came anyway. That was what it meant to be human. On the hospital ship Mercy's Edge, Dr. Hana Choi prepared for casualties. Thought she was a small woman with gentle hands and sad eyes. She had been a military doctor for 15 years. She had saved thousands of lives. She had lost thousands more. She knew what war looked like from the inside. From the operating tables and the recovery wards, where broken soldiers tried to remember who they had been before the bullets and the fire. Her medical staff worked in silence, converting cargo bays into emergency wards. They stacked blood supplies and surgical kits. They prepared for burns, for radiation exposure, for the kind of injuries that only space combat could create. One of her young nurses paused beside her. "Doctor, do you think we can wean?" Hannah looked at the young woman. She could lie. She could offer false hope. But that was not who she was. "I do not know," she said honestly. "The Dominion has never lost a war. They have conquered 40 species. Their fleet is larger than ours. Their ships are more powerful. By every measure, we should lose." The nurse's face fell. "But," Hana continued, "none of those other species came from a death world. None of them evil. Fed on a planet that tried to kill them every single day. None of them spent their entire existence learning how to survive the impossible." She put her hand on the nurse's shoulder. "We are not like other species. And maybe that will be enough." The nurse nodded and went back to work. Hana hoped she was right. On the Indomitable, Admiral Park held a briefing for his senior officers. The main display showed the Velari system. 3 planets. 1 habitable. The Dominion fleet was already there, surrounding the Velari homeworld like predators, circling wounded prey. The sensors showed thousands of ships, carriers, battleships, destroyers, troop, transports loaded with soldiers ready to occupy the planet, can drag its population into slavery. Current intelligence shows approximately 3,000 Dominion vessels. Ji-Wan reported. Their fleet is primarily composed of Terran warships. The Terran are the ruling species of the Dominion. Cold-blooded reptilians. Average height 3 meters. Extremely strong. They view other species as inferior and treat conquest as their natural right. What about their military record? Sung-ho asked. Undefeated. Every species they have faced has surrendered within weeks. Most surrendered within days. The Terran do not accept prolonged resistance. They make examples of those who fight back. Orbital bombardment. Mass executions. Enslavement of the survivors. The room was quiet. They have never fought a Deathworld species, Taiyo said. They have never fought beings who evolved to survive anything. With respect, Admiral, one of the younger captains said, we are still outnumbered 3 to 1. Our ships are smaller. Our weapons are less powerful. How do we win? Taiho smiled. It was not a pleasant smile. We win by being what we are. Humans are not like other species. We do not surrender when things become difficult. We do not break when we are hurt. We adapt. We endure. We keep fighting until there is nothing left to fight with, and then we fight with our bare hands." He looked around the room at his officers, at the veterans and the rookies, at the career soldiers and the volunteers who had never worn a uniform before last week. "The Dominion expects us to be like everyone else they have conquered. They expect us to see their numbers and lose hope. They expect us to calculate our odds and surrender. That is their weakness. They do not understand what they are facing." He pointed at the display. "When we engage them, they will be surprised. When we take damage and keep fighting, they will be confused. When we refuse to retreat, even when our ships are burning, they will be afraid, because they have never seen anything like us. And by the time they understand what humans truly are, it will be too late." The briefing ended. The officers returned to their ships dot across the fleet. Weapons were loaded. Engines were primed. Soldiers wrote letters to families they might never see again. Some prayed. Some drank. Some sat in silence, thinking about what was to come. The Union ambassadors sent one last message, begging the humans to reconsider. They warned of consequences. They spoke of treaties and alliances and political realities. Taiho did not reply at exactly midnight. Ship time, the fleet received its final orders. All ships. This is Admiral Park. Jump coordinates are being transmitted now. When we arrive, we will be outnumbered and outgunned. Many of us will not return. But we will not let that stop us. We will not let fear control us. We will fight for those who cannot fight for themselves. We will show the galaxy what humanity is made of." He paused. "All ships, jump." 1,200 human vessels activated their hyperspace drives. The stars stretched into lines of light. The fleet disappeared into the void. On the other side of the galaxy, the Dominion continued its bombardment of Velari. Prime, they did not know that. Death was coming for them. They would learn soon enough. Human fleet emerged from hyperspace into hell. Velari Prime burned below them. Great columns of smoke rose from the planet's surface where cities had once stood. Orbital stations were shattered ruins, their pieces floating through space like the bones of dead giants. Millions of Velari were already dead. Millions more huddled in underground shelters, waiting for the end dot, and between the fleet and the planet, 3,000 Dominion warships waited. Teo stared at the view screen. He had known what to expect. The intelligence reports had been clear, but seeing it with his own eyes was different. The Dominion fleet stretched across the void like a wall of steel and fire. Battleships the size of small moons. Carriers launching swarms of fighter craft. Destroyers moving in perfect formation. It was the most terrifying sight he had ever witnessed. It did not matter. "All ships," he said calmly, "form up. Prepare for combat." The human fleet arranged itself. They were outnumbered, outgunned, and far from home. Every captain knew the odds. Every soldier understood what they faced. None of them ran. The Dominion commander hailed them. His name was Vorak, and he was a legend among his people. He was a Terran, a massive reptilian creature with scales like armor and teeth like knives. He had conquered 7 worlds. He had crushed rebellions with brutal efficiency. He had never lost a battle in his entire career. His face appeared on the main view screen, and Taiho saw contempt in his yellow eyes. "Deathworlders," Vorak said. His voice was deep and cold. "You come to die for insects? Your courage is amusing, but it is also foolish. I offer you one chance. Surrender now, and some of you may survive as slaves. Resist, and I will destroy every one of your ships and mount your skulls on my wall." Taiho looked at the alien warlord. He thought about the Velari dying below. He thought about the millions already taken into slavery. He thought about his crew, his fleet, and everything humanity had become since clawing its way out of the mud. "We do not surrender," Taiho said. "We do not retreat, and we do not forgive." He cut the transmission. "All ships," he said, "attack." The battle began. Human ships surged forward in a wave of steel and fury. The Dominion fleet responded with overwhelming firepower. Plasma beams lit up the void. Missiles screamed through space. The darkness exploded into light. The first human ship to fall was a frigate named Defiant. A Terran battleship caught it with a direct hit, tearing through its hull and detonating its reactor. The ship vanished in a ball of fire. 300 crew, gone in an instant. But the humans did not stop. They fought like nothing the Dominion had ever seen. When their ships were damaged, they kept fighting. When their weapons failed, they rammed their enemies. When they were forced to abandon ship, they ejected into space and survived long enough to be rescued. No other species could survive the vacuum for more than seconds. Humans lasted minutes. Commander Junho Ma led a squadron of strike fighters directly into the heart of the Dominion formation. He was a pilot born and bred, with reflexes that bordered on supernatural. His fighters weaved through enemy fire, dodging beams that would have vaporized them. "Target the carrier," Junho ordered. "We take out their fighters at the source." His squadron dove toward a massive Terran carrier. Its defensive guns tried to track them, but the human fighters were too fast, too unpredictable. They slipped through the carrier's shields and flew directly into its open hangar bay. Inside, Terran soldiers waited. They were huge, nearly twice the size of the human pilots. They roared with confidence. Junho's fighter crashed into the hangar floor. He kicked open the cockpit and emerged with a rifle in his hands. Around him, his pilots did the same. The fight was brutal. The Terran were stronger. They had claws that could tear through armor. They had teeth that could crush bone. But the humans were faster. They were trained for this kind of close combat. And they absolutely refused to die. Junho killed 3 Terran with his rifle. When the rifle ran dry, he pulled his sidearm. When the sidearm was empty, he used his knife. When the knife broke, he used his fists. 15 minutes later, the carrier's bridge was in human hands. Junho stood over the body of the ship's captain, breathing hard, covered in blood that was not entirely his own. "Bridge secured," he reported. "Bringing their guns online now." The carrier's weapons turned on its own fleet. Across the battlefield, the pattern repeated. Human ships took damage that would have crippled any other species. They absorbed hits and kept shooting. They refused to retreat even when their hulls were breached and their crews were dying. On the Indomitable, an explosion tore through the port side. Fire swept through 3 decks. Dozens of crew were killed instantly. More were trapped in burning compartments. Taiho felt his ship shudder under his feet. Alarms screamed. Damage reports flooded in. "Hull breach on decks 7 through 9, Yuna reported. "We have lost main weapons on the port side. Engine output is down to 60%. "Keep fighting," Taiho ordered. They kept fighting. The battle lasted for hours. Human ships fell. Dominion ships fell. The void filled with wreckage and bodies and the silent screams of the dying. But slowly, impossibly, the tide began to turn. The Dominion commanders had never faced an enemy like this. They did not understand what they were seeing. Other species broke. Other species surrendered. These humans just kept coming, no matter how many of them died. No matter how badly they were hurt. Fear began to spread through the Terran ranks. Vorak watched from his flagship as a human destroyer, earning from bow to stern, rammed directly into one of his battleships. The impact destroyed both vessels. The human captain had chosen to die rather than retreat. For the first time in his life, Vorak felt something he had never felt before. By the time the battle ended, a third of the human fleet was destroyed or crippled. 400 ships gone. Thousands dead. It was the bloodiest day in human military history, but half the Dominion Armada was gone too. Vorak gave an order he had never given before. All ships retreat. The Dominion fleet turned and fled. On the Indomitable, the crew watched them go. They were exhausted. They were wounded. They had lost friends and comrades in ships that had been their homes, but they had one. Tejo sat in his command chair, staring at the screen. Below them, Velari Prime still burned. But it was not conquered. The Velari were still alive. The fight was not over. Send a message to the surface, he said quietly. Tell them that help has arrived. Tell them that they are not alone anymore. He closed his eyes. Tell them that humanity keeps its promises. The news spread across the galaxy like fire. The Dominion had retreated. The undefeated Empire had been beaten by a species that most civilizations had never heard of. A species from a death world. A species called humans. On 100 worlds, beings watched the footage and could not believe their eyes. Terran battleships burning. Terran soldiers falling. The mighty Dominion fleet running from ships half their size, crewed by creatures who should not have been able to survive a single engagement. The Galactic Union's council met in emergency session. The ambassadors argued for days. Some wanted to condemn humanity for starting a war. Others pointed out that humanity had done what the council had been too afraid to do for centuries, but none of that mattered to the soldiers on the ground. General Sora No led the liberation of Velari Prime. She was a legend among ground forces. Small in stature, but terrifying in combat. She had served in 6 colonial conflicts and never lost a campaign. Her soldiers would follow her into any battle because they knew she would never ask them to do something she would not do herself. The drop pods fell from orbit like metal rain. Inside one of them, Sora felt the heat of atmospheric entry burning through the ablative shielding. Around her, her soldiers sat in silence, their weapons ready, their faces calm. They had trained for this. They had waited for this. The pod hit the ground with a force that would have killed any non-Deathworlder. The doors blew open. Sora was the first one out. The Tauren occupation forces were waiting. They were dug into the ruins of a Velari city. Massive reptilian soldiers in heavy armor, armed with weapons designed for beings much larger than humans. They outnumbered the landing force 3-1. Their commander was certain of victory. He was wrong. Human soldiers fought differently than anything the Tauren had ever faced. They moved in small teams, using cover, striking fast and retreating before the enemy could respond. They were smaller than Tauren, which meant they could hide in places the aliens could not reach. They were faster, which meant they could outmaneuver heavier opponents. And they were absolutely relentless. Sora led from the front. She killed a Tauren sergeant with a single shot to the eye. She cleared a building with grenades and precise fire. When a Tauren soldier grabbed one of her men, she jumped on its back and put a knife through its skull. The battle lasted for 2 days. When it was over, the occupation force was destroyed. 3,000 Tauren dead. The survivors fled into the wilderness, hunted by soldiers who never tired and never stopped. The Velari emerged from their shelters. They looked at the human soldiers with eyes full of wonder and fear. They had never seen such violence. They had never imagined that such destruction was possible, but they were free. A Velari elder approached Sora. He was old, his wings tattered, his body bent by age and grief. He had lost his family in the first bombardment. He had spent 2 weeks hiding underground, listening to the screams of his people. Why? He asked in a voice that trembled. Why did you come? You did not know us. We had nothing to offer you. Why did your people die for mine? Sora looked at him. She thought about all the soldiers she had lost, all the friends she would never see again, all the letters she would have to write to families back home. Because it was the right thing to do, she said simply. That is all the reason we need. While the ground war continued, Intelligence Director Dohan Lee worked in the shadows. He was not a soldier. He did not carry a weapon. His wars were fought with information and influence, with whispered words and secret messages. And he was very, very good at his job. From his command ship, he reached out to the slave species across Dominion space. Beings who had been conquered and broken. Beings who had given up hope. He showed them the footage of human victory. He told them that the Dominion could be beaten. He offered them weapons and support and a chance at freedom. The rebellions began within weeks. On a mining world in the Dominion's outer territories, slave workers seized control of their facility. On a factory planet, production lines were sabotaged. On a dozen worlds, beings who had bowed their heads for generations suddenly looked up and saw a future that did not include chains. The Dominion was forced to pull forces from the front lines to deal with the uprisings. Their empire, built on fear and submission, was cracking from the inside. And still the humans kept coming. Earth's factories ran day and night. Mars's shipyards launched new vessels every week. Humanity had learned long ago that war was not just about battles. It was about production, about logistics, about the ability to replace what was lost faster than the enemy could destroy it. For every human ship destroyed, 3 more were built. For every soldier killed, 10 more volunteered. The Dominion had never faced an enemy like this. They were used to quick victories. They were used to species that surrendered after the first defeat. They did not understand how to fight a war of attrition against an enemy that simply refused to stop. On the Indomitable, Ensign Minji Kong intercepted a transmission from the Taran homeworld. She was young, barely 22, but she had proven herself in the first battle. She had stayed at her post even when the ship was burning around her. She had kept communications running when everyone else thought they would die. "Admiral," she said, her voice steady despite her nerves. "I have Commander Vorak on direct channel. He is demanding to speak with you." Tai-Ho nodded. "Put him through." Vorak's face appeared on the screen. He looked different now. The contempt was gone. In its place was something cold and desperate. "Admiral Park," Vorak said, "this war has gone on long enough. I am prepared to offer terms. Withdraw your forces from Velari space. Return to your territories. In exchange, I will spare your colonies. I will not pursue further hostilities against humanity." He leaned forward. "But if you continue this war, I will rain fire upon every human world. Your colonies will burn. Your people will die screaming. I will make an example of your species that the galaxy will remember for 1,000 years." Tai-Ho looked at the alien warlord. He thought about the threats. He thought about his people, scattered across the stars. He thought about everything they could lose. Then he smiled. "You have been fighting this war for 8 months, he said. "In that time, you have lost half your fleet. You have lost a dozen worlds to rebellion. Your empire is falling apart around you, and you come to me with threats?" He shook his head. "You still do not understand what you are facing." He stood up. "We are not going to stop. We are not going to retreat. We are going to keep coming until there is nothing left of your dominion. And when we are done, every species you have enslaved will be free. Every world you have conquered will belong to its people again. And your name will be remembered as the fool who thought he could frighten humanity into submission." He ended the transmission. Ji-Wan stepped up beside him. "He will attack our colonies." "He will try," Tai-Ho agreed. "But his forces are scattered. His empire is burning. And we have friends now that we did not have before. He was right. Across the galaxy, species that had watched from the shadows were finally choosing sides. The Galactic Union, after months of debate, voted to provide humanitarian aid to human forces. It was not much, but it was a start. Other species went further. Ships arrived from worlds that had never sent soldiers anywhere, crewed by beings who had seen the footage and decided that if humans could fight, so could they. The war was no longer humanity against the Dominion. It was the galaxy waking up, and the Dominion would face them all. 2 years of war. 2 years of blood and fire and death. 2 years of battles across 100 star systems. 2 years of sacrifice that would be remembered for millennia. And now, finally, it was ending. The fleet gathered above Tyros, a Dominion capital world. Admiral Taiho Park stood on the bridge of the Indomitable and watched the ships arrive. Human vessels scarred by countless battles. Allied ships from 30 different species, flying side by side with their liberators. The Velari had even built their own warships, crude but functional, crewed by a species that had never known war before the humans came. It was the largest fleet ever assembled in galactic history. 8,000 vessels from across known space, united for one purpose. To end the Dominion forever. Below them, Tyros hung in the void like a dark jewel. It was a cold world, harsh and unforgiving, perfect for the reptilian species that had built their empire there. From its surface, the Terran had launched their campaigns of conquest. From its palaces, their leaders had ordered the enslavement of billions. Today, it would fall. Jiwan-Ru stood beside her admiral, studying the tactical display. They have 2,000 ships remaining. Their fleet is concentrated around the planet in a defensive formation. They know they cannot win, but they will make us pay for every meter. Taiho nodded. Then we make it quick. No prolonged siege. We hit them with everything we have and break through to the surface. And Varrock? He dies today. The human admiral opened a channel to the fleet. His voice was calm, but carried across thousands of ships. This is Admiral Park. 2 years ago, we answered a call for help that everyone else ignored. We went to war against an enemy that had never been defeated. We lost friends. We lost family. We lost ships and soldiers and pieces of ourselves that we will never get back. He paused. On every ship, beings of a dozen species listened. But we also found something. We found that courage is contagious. We found that when one species stands up for what is right, others will follow. We found that the galaxy is not as cruel and uncaring as we feared. He looked at the planet below. Today, we end this. Today, we free the last slaves. Today, we show the universe that empires built on suffering will always fall to those brave enough to fight them. All ships, advance. The battle for Tyros began. It was the most brutal engagement of the war. The Terran fought with the desperation of cornered predators. They knew there would be no surrender, no negotiation. The Alliance had made it clear that the Dominion's leadership would face justice for their crimes. Human ships led the assault. They had been doing this for 2 years now. They knew how to fight Terran vessels. They knew the weaknesses in their shields, the blind spots in their formations. Captain Sungho Beak brought the black tide through a wall of enemy fire. His destroyer was smaller than the Terran battleships, but it was faster and more maneuverable. He danced between plasma beams, returning fire with precise strikes that crippled engines and disabled weapons. "Torpedo bay, fire full spread," he ordered. 12 torpedoes launched from his ship. 11 were shot down by defensive fire. 1 made it through and detonated against a Terran carrier's reactor. The carrier broke apart in a cascade of explosions. Sungho did not celebrate. There were more enemies to kill. Dr. Hana Choi's hospital ship stayed back from the front lines, but the casualties came anyway. Shuttles arrived carrying wounded soldiers from Allied vessels. Human and alien alike lay on her operating tables, united by their injuries. She worked for 18 hours without rest. She saved lives that should have been lost. She lost lives that should have been saved. It was the nature of her work, the burden she carried. A young Velari soldier was brought in with burns across half his body. He was dying. They both knew it. "Do not waste your time on me," he said, his voice weak. "There are others who can be saved." Hannah looked at him, at this being from a peaceful species who had taken up arms to fight beside humanity. "Everyone is worth saving," she said. "That is why we are here." She worked on him for an hour. Against all odds, he survived. Commander Junho Ma led the assault on Vorak's flagship. The Tarain commander had retreated to his most powerful vessel, a massive dreadnought that had been the terror of the galaxy. Its guns could destroy cruisers with a single shot. Its armor could withstand anything short of a nuclear strike. But Junho had fought his way through worse. His strike squadron punched a hole through the flagship's defensive screen. They flew through a storm of fire, losing pilots with every passing second. Junho watched his friends die, watched their ships explode around him, and kept flying. When his fighter was hit and its engines failed, he did not retreat. He aimed his crippled craft at the flagship's hangar bay and rode it down. The crash nearly killed him. He crawled from the wreckage with a broken arm and blood in his eyes. Terran soldiers converged on his position. He killed them with his sidearm until it was empty, then with a knife, then with his fists. Reinforcements arrived. Sergeant Yoonji Moon led a boarding party that had breached through a different section. She was young but fierce, a soldier who had enlisted on the day humanity declared war and had survived every battle since. Together, they fought their way to the bridge. Vorak was waiting. He stood among the bodies of his guards, a massive figure covered in ancient battle scars. He held a weapon in one clawed hand, but he made no move to use it. He watched the humans approach with yellow eyes that held no fear. "So," he said, "the Deathworlders have come for me." Junho stepped forward, his broken arm hanging at his side. "It is over. Your fleet is destroyed. Your empire is gone. Surrender." Vorak laughed. It was a cold, bitter sound. "Surrender? To you? I am Vorak of the Terran. I have conquered worlds. I have crushed armies. I do not surrender to anyone." He moved faster than something his size should have been able to move. He crossed the distance between them in a heartbeat, claws reaching for Junho's throat. Yoonji shot him. The bullet punched through Vorak's skull and out the other side. The warlord stumbled. He looked surprised. Then he felt it was over. Within hours, the Tarain government surrendered. The war that had seemed impossible to win was won. The aftermath took years to sort out. Slave pens across former Dominion territory were opened. Billions of beings saw sunlight for the first time in generations. They were given food and medicine and freedom, and many of them wept because they had forgotten what hope felt like. The Galactic Union was reorganized. Humanity was offered a permanent seat on the High Council, not as a curiosity, but as equals, partners, protectors, the species that had answered a call for help and changed the galaxy forever. On Velari Prime, a memorial was built to honor the fallen. Human names and Velari names and names from a dozen other species, carved into stone so that no one would forget that Dr. Hana Choi walked through a rebuilt city, helping establish a new hospital. A Velari elder found her there, the same one who had asked why humans had come. "My people have been debating how to repay you," he said. "We have no wealth. We have no military power. We have nothing to offer It would match what you sacrificed. Hannah smiled at him. We did not come for payment. I know. That is what makes it so hard to accept. He touched her hand gently. But I want you to know that we will remember. For as long as the Valari exist, we will tell the story of the humans who came from a death world and fought for people they had never met. We will teach our children and our children's children. You will never be forgotten. Hannah thought about the soldiers who had died, the ships that had burned, the families who had lost everything so that strangers could be free. That is enough, she said quietly. That is more than enough. On the bridge of the Indomitable, Admiral Taiho Park stared out at the stars. The war was over. His ship was scarred and battered, held together by repairs and determination. His crew was tired. He was tired. But they had done what they set out to do. G1 stood beside him. The historians will be arguing about this for centuries. How a single Death World species started a war and won. How we convinced the galaxy to fight. Let them argue, Taiho said. We know the truth. And what is that? He thought about the distress call that had started everything. The Valari voice, thin and desperate, begging for help that no one else would provide. We came because someone needed us, he said. That is all that matters. That is all that has ever mattered. He looked at the stars, at the galaxy that had changed because humanity had refused to look away. And if it happens again, he said quietly, we will do the same thing. That was the human way. That always had been that. It always would be.